I think the current state of humanity is one of a lot of confusion. It's a state where we build these really powerful tools already and we don't know how to use them. And more importantly, we don't teach the next generation how to use them. And as a consequence, we have seen all these problems already. We have a loneliness epidemic in the world.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome to AI and the Future of Work. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. If you like what we do, please tell a friend, give us a like and a rating, and maybe consider sharing this one with someone you care about. They'll know that maybe you were thinking of them, and that's how the community grows. Another way this community grows is through our newsletter. We launched it about 6 months ago. And every week, we share some additional fun facts that don't always make it into the main episode and a little bit more context than you get just listening to the weekly podcast. Go ahead and subscribe to that. We'll put a link in the show notes. If you leave a comment, I just may share it in an upcoming episode, like this one from loyal listener Tina in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, who works at a biotech company. Tina's favorite episode is number 290 with Version CEO Aditya Prakash about extending life with AI. A great one. We'll put a link to that one in the show notes as well. We learn from AI thought leaders each week. Of course, the extra bonus is you get one fun fact. Here's your AI fun fact for today. Thibaut Spirlet writes in Business Insider that Perplexity's CEO says his AI browser Comet could replace 2 white-collar roles every company relies on. That is so clickbaity. Perplexity CEO Aravind Srinivas thinks the future of AI isn't in chatbots, but in your browser. And he said it's coming for 2 roles that every modern workplace depends on: recruiters and administrative assistants. He described how Comet's built-in AI agent can access apps like Gmail, LinkedIn, and Google Calendar to generate candidate lists, pull contact information, and send personalized outreach emails, tasks typically handled by recruiting coordinators and sourcers. Srinivas also believes Comet can take over many of an executive assistant's day-to-day duties, like email triage, calendar management, and meeting prep. My commentary: this is straight from the Department of Irresponsible Journalism, amplifying irresponsible, self-serving, tech elite posturing. The Comet browser, and AI browsers in general, change the web experience from passive to active. It's exciting that a browser may soon push content to us instead of waiting for us to pull it. The more agency we give it, the more likely it is to deliver unexpected results. A browser is not about to take over any job. It will soon augment work for all of us. But like even the smartest colleague, it will make mistakes and require explicit guidance to do useful work. The best therapy after reading a clickbaity article like this is to shut the laptop, walk outside, smell a rose, and celebrate what it means to be human. That's something that no bot will ever do. Now, shifting to this week's conversation, we have a rare and very special repeat guest on today's show. Longtime listeners last met him on season 3 in May 2021. Dr. Mark van Rijmenam is ranked among the world's best futurists and recognized by Salesforce as one of the top voices shaping AI. He's a sought-after global speaker on topics related to innovation and humanity, known around the world for his trademark optimistic dystopian viewpoint. Perhaps most notably, Dr. Mark presented the world's first TEDx talk in virtual reality in 2020 and unveiled a digital twin that speaks 29 languages in 2024. Dr. Mark received his PhD in management from the University of Technology in Sydney, where he studied how organizations should leverage big data, blockchain, and AI. He's also an insanely driven endurance athlete whose pain tolerance is higher than yours, and he's a 6-time published author. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome back my former co-host of the Between Two Bots podcast, and most important, my friend, Dr. Mark van Rijmenam. Mark, Welcome back, my man.
Thank you very much, Dan. Such a pleasure to be on the show again. I can't believe it's been for such a long time since I've been on your show. The time certainly flies in the age of of AI, where new updates are happening faster than you can remember. So it's great to be on your show again, and very much looking forward to this conversation.
The calendar says 3 years, but we're living dog years, so I think it's more like 21. So much catching up to do. Hard to know where to start, but you just published your 6th book. You gave me the opportunity to read the manuscript. It's fantastic, as is all of your books, but this one really resonated with me. Tell us about Now What, and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. Well, the book is here. Now What? How to Ride a Tsunami of Change. The first copy ever in my hands. So I'm very proud of that. It is indeed my 6th book. The reason why I wrote this book is because from all my conversations with Fortune 500 companies around the world, I've sort of really started to notice that everyone is struggling at the moment with how to deal with all this disruption that is happening. Many organizations are in sort of this fight, flight, or freeze mode, that they don't know what to do anymore because of all the technological disruption, but also the ecological disruption, the geopolitical disruption. There's just so much happening at the same time. And I wanted to write a book that gives an answer to that. How people, individuals, organizations, as well as societies can prepare for what is to come, but can prepare and do so in an ethical and responsible approach. Because I think that's how I look at the world. I'd like to build, futures, design and build futures that are beneficial to everyone. And that's why I wrote this book, to help, just like I see myself as an architect of tomorrow, to help everyone become an architect of tomorrow, so that we can design and build a better future for all of us. So that's what I did. That's why I set out to write this book, and I took a very broad approach compared to my other books, which were very much very technologically focused. One was about big data, the one was about the blockchain, the other one was about AI, and one about the metaverse. And this is a more higher perspective on technology, where I looked at different philosophies. I looked at nature. I looked at indigenous cultures, Asian cultures, European, Western cultures, and to understand what lessons can we draw from this, to understand how can we prepare for a better future.
One of the things that is most notable about the book, as I mentioned when we were just catching up prior, is that it's information dense. It's not 3 pages conveniently expanded into 300. And there's so many good examples from your field work. Maybe take one example, maybe a Fortune 500 company that is non-obvious, something that you learned through your research that you weren't expecting to find out.
Well, I think one of the examples that I describe in my book is where I look at Microsoft, where I think how Microsoft has changed the organization past years with Satya Nadella really changing the culture of the company, and really having a culture that's a lot more focused on the broader stakeholder perspective, and where we build companies that are a lot more interconnected. And one of the examples that I leverage, where I say, oh, look, this is how we can build a company as well, where we take a different approach. Or the example of Tesla a long time ago, where they open sourced all their patents to help propel the world into a much more EV era. And that's sort of the different approach that I use in the book, to say, okay, look, we all know how most companies today make money, focus purely on shareholder short-term perspective. Instead, I think we should focus more on a long-term stakeholder perspective, where we take into consideration everyone on this planet when we build a company. And I think that will give it a lot better chance to do so. And with the book, a lot of business books are, they bring a lot of value, but they often tend to remain quite abstract in their storytelling. And I actually created I did a science fiction story in this book, because I think a science fiction story is a great way to leverage the thinking of science fiction writers, who have a tendency to be able to think very, very far in the future, expand on today's technology to make far-fetched scenarios more tangible, so that as organizations, as individuals, as societies, we can prepare for that. And I did the same thing in this book. So there's quite an interesting science fiction story in the book that sort of comes back throughout every chapter to help you understand what is going on and to make sense of all this disruption that's happening, both the good, the bad, and the ugly, and so that how we can leverage that technology for good.
When you're first getting introduced to an organization, what are some of the indicators that organization is, quote, future-proof or kind of ready for what's next?
Well, I think the B Corp certification, if your organizations who have embraced that, I think that is a really important indicator where we don't very much look, as I said, from a shareholder first perspective, but we look at a stakeholder first perspective, where we say, okay, we don't only going to take care of our customers today, but also for our customers tomorrow, for our employees tomorrow, and we think more carefully about how we implement technology. You used the example of Perplexity at the start of this conversation, and the Perplexity browser, which of course gets a lot of attention at the moment. But I don't think we should forget that earlier, but a couple of months ago, he said that the browser would track everything that you do, like absolutely everything and anything, even your passwords. Everything will be tracked to sell you more ads. Well, that to me is the wrong approach. That to me is a very short-term, shareholder-driven, money profit-driven perspective that doesn't hold the user's best interest, but just holds the shareholder's best interest. And I wish we could see more companies have a different approach, where we would hold the user's perspective as their best interest. I don't think that's the right approach, and I think we need to think more carefully about what we do, how we use this technology, especially because all the AI that we're building today will become sort of the foundational models of tomorrow. And if we don't think carefully about what we build today, we set ourselves up for a lot of problems in the future. And I had this conversation last week where we sort of discussed humanity is from a philosophical perspective not ready to deal with the AI, the powerful AI tools that we're building, and that is really problematic because we're building technology that is incredibly powerful. And as a species, as humanity, we are not ready to deal with that. And I think that is very, very problematic.
I want to talk about the future of humanity, but not first without asking you an important question about the present of humanity. So you go all around the world, you give a lot of talks, people are hanging on your every word, talking about what the future holds. And then I assume a lot of times you open up for Q&A. And I mentioned your optimistic dystopian viewpoint. Maybe share the current state of humanity. What kinds of things come up in Q&A after you've given your vision of the future?
I think the current state of humanity is one of a lot of confusion. It's a state of where we build these really powerful tools already, and we don't know how to use them. And more importantly, we don't teach the next generation how to use them. And as a consequence, we have seen all these problems already, where we have a loneliness epidemic in the world, where we have Mr. Zuckerberg saying that the solution for the loneliness epidemic is talking to more AI agents. The fact that we live in a society where we accept that as normal, I think says a lot about the state of humanity today, because it is not normal to say, "Oh, you're lonely. Here's an AI agent. Start talking to it." So I think we. In my book, I use a theory which is called spiral dynamics, which I'm very fond of. I think it's a way to help us understand at which worldview we are as a species. And just for the listeners, really, really brief, it has like eight levels. First tier has 6 levels. Second tier has 2 levels. And you start from beige, which is all about survival. So that's when you're born, or that's where, unfortunately, the people in Gaza at the moment, where they literally have to survive and fight for food. so that you can't think about anything else. Then you have purple, which is all about very much your family. It's your group of people, but it's also when you go to the stadium to support your local football club or soccer club, whatever. And you have your very in a sort of a clan-like approach. Then you go to red, which is very much power. It's all about power, and there are obviously a few world leaders at the moment that really portray that, where it only is about power and it's all about yourself, about me, and I want to be as powerful as possible. Then you go to the blue phase, which is more about the community phase, religion, institutions that work together to create a better world. Then we move to the orange phase, which is all about I again, which is all about power. It's all about shareholder value. It's about innovation. It's about building companies, but very much from your perspective and not a wider perspective. Then we move to green, which is more about sustainability. We see that the world needs help, but we need to, we're going to create a better, more sustainable world. But that's the first tier. And in the first tier, everyone has to go through these phases. And the challenge with the first tier is that the one tier will always blame the other. So the green tier blames the orange for all the damage to the world. The orange blames the blue tier for the religious approach, etc. But people can also be in multiple levels at the same time, for different areas. Family-wise, you can be in blue. Business-wise, you can be in orange, etc. Then you move to the next level, which is the second tier, which is yellow and turquoise. And yellow means you start to see the world a lot more from an interconnected perspective, much more holistic, and you can see over the different levels. You can see from a more meta level perspective over the different levels, and you can see, well, we need all these levels to grow as a humanity, but we also need to integrate them all in a more holistic approach. And then the final level is turquoise, where you start to see the world as one truly interconnected being, where there's one global consciousness, which research start to indicate is sort of the case probably with quantum processes happening in our brain, and that's where you really start to see, okay, we are all connected to each other, and we need to have a very long term perspective in for the world. We are the custodians of the next generation, and we need to build something together. And as a humanity where we are at the moment, the majority of the people are in blue and in orange, and that's just not necessarily bad. That's just the way it is, but we want to have the world more move into a green, yellow, where we can see, well, the world is interconnected. Everything that we build is interconnected. I've got a lot of examples in the book about this interconnection, where it becomes very unexpected where there are connections. And related to this, what I also describe in the book, which I think is really important, is that we humans, we think that our reality is the reality, which is obviously not the case. Your reality, Dan, is different from my reality, but that doesn't mean that your reality is better than mine or mine is better than yours. It means that you have a different perspective to the world, just like a 3 can be an E, an M, or a W. And I take examples from nature where, a bat sees the world completely different. And we, as the famous saying goes, we have no idea what it is like to be a bat. Or a bee sees in ultraviolet, etc. So they have a different reality. And as a humanity, I think we need to be able to integrate multiple perspectives in how we build our companies, our personal lives, our society, etc. So are we there yet? To come back to your question, as a humanity, definitely not. I think we're very much driven by our own perspective. My reality is the reality, and I think that needs to change.
So the great framework, by the way. Thanks for sharing that, Spiral Dynamics. And of course, we'll link to the book in the show notes. So let's say we would like humanity to get to turquoise. I don't think that's overly controversial based on your description. What needs to happen between where we are today and the future society or global attitude toward progress that could help us achieve turquoise?
Well, I think it requires what I describe in my keynotes and also in the book. It requires a gestalt shift. It requires to see the world through a different lens. It's a bit like the famous duck-rabbit illusion. You either see a duck or a rabbit, but you can't see them both at once. And this is the same thing. We need to be able to see a different perspective, to see the world through a different lens that there's more than your company. There's more than your reality. There's other realities as well. And I think if we would be open to more perspectives, I think the world would be a better place. I think if we could learn from each other, instead of being in an AI arms race, but instead we could collaborate with the best perspectives from the United States, from China, from Europe, I think we can create a better society. And unfortunately, we're not, because the whole narrative about everything at the moment it's all about us versus them. And I think that we need to change that narrative. But that's really hard, and maybe I'm naive to think that we will ever achieve that. But I really do believe that we need to be able to do that. We only have one planet. We all live on this one together, and let's just make something nice out of it.
So everything about that answer was satisfying, because it wasn't assuming that AI will somehow influence or dominate the transition to turquoise. It was all about society and humanness, and presumably an extension of what you just said is that technology, including AI and what may come next, quantum and other things that may influence or accelerate AI, could be part of that kind of gestalt shift. But the role, I think you made clear, of AI/technology and humans, there's a clear distinction that I feel like, just to go back to that silly article, R. von Srinivas doesn't really capture it. There's no nuance. We become the browser becomes us. Talk about what your perspective is on the relationship between humans and machines, and how are they separate, even though I feel like a lot of the doomers, or a lot of even big thinkers are taking that to an extreme and assuming that we're rapidly converging.
Well, I think we need to be very careful that technology is a tool, and it always will be a tool. And that's why also I believe we shouldn't anthropomorphize AI. We should never say he or she to ChatGPT. It's an it. We shouldn't say he or she to a robot. It's an it. I think we should really make that distinction clear. It's humans and machines, and we can collaborate. We can augment each other. But it is not, a machine is not a he or she or they or a them or whatsoever. It's an it. And I think that is really, really important, first and foremost. Secondly, I think when we talk about the machines, the way everything that we instill in these machines will perpetuate for the future. If we when it comes to these large language models, and the fact that, for example, Grok, Elon Musk's AI, which is highly biased to a certain degree, and is, if that becomes one of the models that will create and build and train future models, that bias will be in there forever. And that is quite challenging, well, problematic, I'd say, where we need machines that are unbiased, that are helping us be more human or more humane. And the more also we shift our thinking to AI, the more we lose our critical thinking, the more we lose our agency into control our own lives. The more we outsource to machines, the more we lose our own agency. The more we become dependent on the companies that create those machines. And I think that is challenging, and we need to maintain our own agency, especially in a world where I do believe that artificial intelligence is just the next step in evolution, where we as intelligent species are creating an intelligence that will vastly outperform our intelligence. Because I don't believe that human intelligence that is the pinnacle of intelligence. It's just a stepping stone in intelligence, and there is no upper limit when it comes to intelligence. So we are creating the next step in evolution. But when we do that, let's do this from a very conscious perspective, knowing that it will have very, very long-term consequences. And let's think a little bit more carefully about how we create these machines, more from a stakeholder perspective than from a shareholder perspective. I wish that humanity had a little bit more of that knowledge already in it when we creating these tools, which are so incredibly powerful, but we don't know how to use them.
It's a very important dialogue. I believe we're ready for a new set of, in the 50s, Asimov came up with the 3 rules of robots. We're ready for a new 3. And I think I will propose the number 1 should be exactly what you said. Don't anthropomorphize the bot. I think we should be, 2 might be, AI only knows what we've taught it. And 3, I would propose, it's my podcast, I get to propose these things. 3 would be AI is perfectly designed to replicate human bias. I think it's important that we provide these kinds of frameworks that remind everyone what it means to augment or enhance ourselves with artificial intelligence, while we always place the emphasis on A more than the I.
Yeah.
Is there a time when today I think we violently agree that humans are not ready for the pace of, we are not evolving as a species as fast as the technology is evolving? Are we going to catch up? Is the technology going to slow down? Are we in a collision course? Like, what happens?
It's a good question. And in my book, I quote by Asimov as well, a quote from 1988, where he says, "The saddest aspect of life right now is that science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom." Here we are. 35, almost 40 years later, and we haven't learned a single lesson in comparison to that statement, that quote. So I think I think we're long overdue for a paradigm shift where we look at the world again through a different lens, from a different perspective, where we start to integrate this technology in a different way. And if I can come back to my book again, in my book I propose a long-term solution and a short-term solution. So my long-term solution is we need to completely revamp education, because if we want to help the next generation understand how the world is changing, we need to educate them. So here in Australia, where I live, we have the social media ban for kids under 16, which I think is like one of the better decisions the Australian government has ever made. I'd like to go a whole step further, where I think we should ban any technology for kids under 16. So no smartphones, no iPads, definitely no social media, no AI, etc. Unless it is in a controlled environment where we teach them how to responsibly use these technologies. And we don't allow kids to drive cars until they have reached either 16 or 18 in most countries, and they have obtained a driver's license. We don't allow kids to drink alcohol because we know that alcohol does significant brain damage to younger children. We now also know that social media does significant brain damage to children, but we still allow them to go on these platforms, and as a consequence, where they are being engulfed by big tech and used to sell more ads to young kids. I think as a society, we would do wise to prevent this altogether and say, well, until 16, you're not allowed to use these tools, and in the years leading up to your 16th birthday, we will help you understand what these technologies are, what the consequences are of these technologies, how you can use them responsibly, etc. Because then we can at least prepare these kids for using these extremely powerful technologies. So that's the long-term solution, because changing your education system takes decades. But I think we need to start with that really, really quickly, and we shouldn't be kept hostage by big tech companies who want to make more money by selling ads to 13-year-olds. I think we should stand up as a society to these big tech companies and say, no, you are wrong. We're going to do it differently, and you have to listen to us, and not the other way around. The short-term solution is where I have come up with a framework, which is called the WAVE framework, in line with riding the tsunami of change, which means you need to watch for signals so you can understand what is coming over the horizon, so you can start preparing for that. You need to you need to adapt your organization or your personal life or your society accordingly based on the signals that you see coming. So, because if you prepare for it on time, then you can make sure that you steer your company or your personal life or your society in the right direction. You need to verify your data, because in this world where trust and truth no longer exist, in a world where deep fakes are everywhere, you need to be able to verify everything that you do, so that you know that who you're talking to is indeed the person that he or she they say they are. That's one of the reasons why I believe that working from home will end in the next 2 or 3 years, because companies will have seen so much fraud and so much damage that they will tell their staff working from home is over, because if you have a meeting with a colleague, you have to do it in person, because we can no longer trust our digital systems. And then the fourth one is empower. So you can empower through education to help everyone do the right thing. And we create an empowered culture within your organization, so that as an organization, you can prepare for what is to come. So watch for signals, adapt with long-term purpose, verify your data, and empower through education. That way you can either you can prepare your personal life, your business, your organization, or your society for what is to come. So a long-term perspective education and a short-term approach, the way forward framework, as I like to call it, to help prepare for what's to come.
Now, this podcast is AI and the Future of Work. And one of the recurring themes is, as humans, for thousands of years, we've derived meaning and purpose from work in some form, the labor, the output of our labor, our identity. And that's not a source of shame, it's a source of pride. I've often said work will change more in the next 3 years than it has in the last 300. I do actually believe that. And as it changes dramatically, what's going to fill the void where maybe a little bit of AI does a little bit of what we used to call work, and there's a void left, and that void was something that helped us drive meaning as humans. How do we navigate that one?
That's a very good and very important question. I believe that AI and robotics and automation will kill 1 billion jobs before the end of this decade. That's 20% of the global workforce. If you remember what happened in the Arab Spring, the Arab Spring happened because there was roughly 20-25% unemployment in the region. So you can sort of understand what is to come if 20% of the world's population will lose their jobs. As you say, work gives purpose, whatever the work is. You might not like your job, but it still gives you purpose. It allows you to take care of your family. It allows you to build a life. So work gives purpose. If we take that away, I think we have a really big challenge as a society, how to prepare for that, especially if we don't educate or guide people in the transition to a world where work is not necessarily anymore the most important thing that you do in your life. So I can see a transition where we sort of move to more creativity, and whether that is creativity with or without the use of AI or technologies, both are, in my opinion, creativity. So it allows us to create things and share that with others. I think there's a lot of room for a lot more empathy in the world, a lot more philosophy in the world, where we could become more humane along the way by being more philosophical and more and showing more empathy to each other and to the world in general. And I think the intercommunication, the interpersonal skills will become really, really important, where we are maybe have a chance to fight this loneliness epidemic by actually spending more time with each other. Because if we don't have to work anymore, there's no point of sitting in your room chatting to an AI. But let's go out and meet people and create meaning by being together and by spending time together and creating memories and etc. So I think we should move more in that direction. I also see, from a negative perspective, I see a big gap starting to appear in society, where most people will deal with AI if it comes to the cheaper products. And if you are rich, then you are able to talk to a human. For example, if you buy something from the cheap clothing shops, the Sheins of this world, and you want to speak to a customer service rep because your pants ripped or whatsoever, you are 100% going to talk to an AI, and you will not be able to speak to a human. If you go for the luxury brands, the Gucci's, the whatever the brands are, you will certainly speak to a human. And I think this gap is really problematic. And then we saw this happening with the CEO, I forgot his name, of Klarna, the buy now pay later app. Who said that he fired 700 staff when ChatGPT came in. And then at some point he said, "Oh, maybe we do need humans. Okay, we are going to bring some humans back, but," and there was a big but, "we will only allow them to speak to our premium customers." So we're going to see this gap in society where if you are rich, if you have money, you can speak to humans. If you're poor, you speak to AI. And that's very problematic. But that's, I'm afraid, what's going to happen.
That is quite dystopian. Less optimistic, more dystopian, but hard to disagree with. Not a counterpoint, but maybe an adjacent point is through these emerging technologies, those who have been underserved, who haven't had access to technology, may all of a sudden have access to the world's libraries and learning tutorials. And I'd like to think that maybe a countervailing force will be enabling a lot of the world that just has not had access to a variety of things, not just education, clean drinking water, perhaps, or safe shelter, things like that. These same technologies could also give the world access to a lot more, of the best of humanity. And I hope that's part of what happens when 20% of the world's jobs are eliminated.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. I'm very optimistic about how AI can be used in education, how AI can be used in healthcare to move to preventative, proactive healthcare instead of passive, reactive healthcare. In bringing clean, as you say, drinking water, where we use AI and quantum computing to solve, to create new materials that will allow us to extract water from air. All these kind of things. That's fantastic. And I do believe that if we are able to manage the current transition period, which will last 10, 15 years, which will be extremely disruptive, but if we manage to pass through that as society, I think there will be abundance on the other side. But the challenge is getting us through that. That's where the real challenge is. How do we transition through this period? But if we manage to do that correctly, if we manage to skill up on empathy, on philosophy, on becoming more humane, I think then we have a chance to reap the benefits that are undoubtedly on the other side, where technology can make our lives better in so many ways. But we just first need to be able to manage that transition.
I think of you not just as almost like an ethnographer when it comes to AI, but also a term we've alluded to a couple times, very important concept, quantum computing. Could you maybe, I know it's hard to ask in a short amount of time, the TLDR on quantum computing, but the utopian side of what's ahead with quantum computing, but also maybe the dystopian side.
Sure. So the utopian side of quantum computing that will allow us to crack some of the world's wicked problems. Some of the problems that are highly complex, have a gazillion stakeholders, and a little change in one end will have a butterfly effect on the other side. And if you understand the butterfly effect and quantum computing will allow us to solve those issues. It will allow us to come up with new materials. It will allow us to find solutions for climate change, to create better medicine, to create hyper-personalized medicine that is targeted to your specific genome. That is the beauty, and especially when we have quantum computing with AI, the convergence of technology, that is where really this will be driven forward. So if we have a robot that leverages quantum computing and AI to create a pill that is extremely personalized to you, and you just have to take one pill instead of 100 pills, and it will prolong your life by 30 years. So you can do so you live a longer life, a happier life, etc. That is the enormous upside of quantum computing, where it will allow us to better understand nature, because we barely understand nature. We think we do understand a lot, and we've made good progress in the past 100, 200 years, but we still know very, very little of how nature really works. They're slowly starting to understand, researchers, that maybe there is quantum processes, quantum entanglement happening inside our brain, which is counterintuitive to everything that we know about quantum computing, because in research labs, if you want to use quantum computing, it needs to be at minus 273 Kelvin or degrees Celsius, which it can't be in 37 degrees Celsius in a wet environment, but apparently that seems to be the case. And if that's the case, that will change everything. So quantum computing has the potential to help us solve some of the world's biggest problems, which is very phenomenal. Now, if you look at the dystopian side of quantum computing, it will also help us crack current computer encryption, the standard RSA encryption, which is being used around the world by all the financial institutions, by all organizations, by all enterprises, by all governments. And quantum computing will crack that encryption method. So we need to shift to quantum resistant encryption algorithms, which are available since a couple of months, a year or so. But integrating that and migrating your existing encryption to a quantum resistant encryption is really, really difficult, very, very expensive investment. And if you thought that the Y2K bug was a problem and that cost the world $100 billion, this is like 100 times more expensive and difficult. And the challenge is that if an organization or a country, most likely a country, would create a quantum computer that can crack the current day encryption methodologies, they will certainly not tell the world, because it's way too useful to just harvest all the data, crack it all, find patterns with AI, understand what's going on, and then leverage all that. And then about a year later and say, oh, we've just cracked encryption. But obviously it had been done long before. And I think we're somewhere in that space at the moment, where you see sort of research saying that they are about to crack certain components of encryption, which most likely mean that already a lot further ahead, because from a purely capitalistic perspective, if you are the first to crack encryption, that is such a competitive advantage that you will certainly not tell anyone. From a society perspective, you would want it to be differently, but from a capitalist perspective, you're certainly not going to tell anyone.
I'm an AI enthusiast and I'm as pro-innovation as it gets, but when it comes to the implications, the concerns that we rightfully should have about quantum computing, I very much support the dystopian case you're making. I get concerned about when the military implications, air traffic control, the energy grid, when things like that become vulnerable, we really do have to think about the responsible use of that technology. And it is imminent. So I appreciate that. Good perspective. We're way over time, but that always happens when you and I catch up. And regardless, we're not ending on a dystopian note. So one last very, very important question before you can get off the hot seat. So your kids are a little bit younger than mine. We're both proud parents. And let's say Mark and Dan are having a version of this conversation and it's 2035 instead of 2025, and our kids are 10 years older. What's the world that we think they'll inherit, or that we want them to inherit in a decade? Not 30, 40 years, 50, but kind of when they're starting to grow up and entering the world of work. What's that look like, and how can we prepare them for that today?
I hope that as humanity we have grown up a lot in that time frame. Often when you go through a crisis, you have to grow up really quickly. As a kid, kids that go through crises will have to grow up really quickly in order to survive. I hope that as a species we grow up really quickly in the coming years as we go through these crises and this disruption that is coming. And I hope that we are able to have a higher level perspective on the world and each other. and that we become a lot more empathetic to each other, and a lot more able to see the longer term perspective, and future generations. I'm currently reading the book Ministry of the Future, which is all about, of course, the future generations that we need to take care of, and I do hope that we will manage to do that. And I think one of the things that to do that is to understand that your reality is not the reality, but that there are a multitude of realities, and everyone is as valid almost as the other most of the time, and that we need to focus on the skills that really matter. Root knowledge is sort of out of date nowadays, because with the click of a bell button or with a thought, you have access to any knowledge that's out there. But it's about how you apply that knowledge that becomes more important. So we need to focus on more analytical skills, that you understand how to deal with the information that's coming your way. We need to focus on becoming more adaptable, because in a world that's changing so fast, we can't be stuck in our grounds. We need to be able to adapt according to the situation. In order to do that, we need to be able to have more, to become better at strategic foresight. So as I said at the start, science fiction writers are very valuable source of information, because they're able to think very, very long term and make things that are very intangible, make it very tangible. And if we are able to take a longer term perspective, we are better able to navigate to what's to come. We need to do so. In order to do so, we need to be focused on digital literacy, so that we really know how to use these tools. Yes, we all know how a smartphone works, but do we truly understand the power that these large language models bring us, and the effect it will have on our critical thinking if we leverage them? Digital literacy, I think, is crucial. And finally, I think ethics is going to be absolutely vital to do. So these skills, analytical skills, adaptability, digital literacy, strategic foresight, and ethics are going to be very, very important to navigate this disruption going forward.
Just brilliant. Mark, promise me that it's not going to be another 3 years before you come back on the podcast. I'm already looking forward to the next one. This is great.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Dan.
Yeah. The book is How to Ride the Tsunami of Change. It's a phenomenal read, as is everything that Dr. Mark has published. Go out and get it. We also, Mark, sped through this one. It went by so quickly. We didn't have a chance to mention FutureWise. Maybe tell the audience what you just launched with FutureWise.
Sure. FutureWise is my platform to help people navigate all this disruption. So FutureWise without the E in the middle, and it will help you cut through the noise of information overload, using hyper-personalized insights that we craft with AI, but from trusted sources. So current version is we are in beta, very early stage. We have a very long-term vision, but we have a feed of trusted sources where you get content that's already summarized. You can drop in an article, a PDF, a video, and soon a podcast, and you get a summary within a second that is tailored to how you like to consume content. So drop in a French YouTube podcast, and you get a summary in English within a second. Really trying to help you navigate through this turmoil of information overload. We do that in a very clean environment, no distraction, no ads, no bots, no spam, no trolls, none of that nonsense. Just a trusted environment where you can consume content, where you get smarter insights faster, so you can be in the know without being out of time, but in a way that you can trust the content that's out there. So we've just launched. We have a big vision to help you navigate this changing world, and I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on it.
Excellent. We'll, of course, put a link to that as well in the show notes. If you get a chance to see Dr. Mark live, he speaks around the globe. I highly encourage you, take advantage of it. And as we sign off, again, Mark, great catching up. Thanks for coming by, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Well, that is all the time and more that we have for today on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from PeopleRain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.